at the enthusiast. Amongst the most notable of these is the North Yorkshire Moors Railway, where the fearsome gradients give rise to memorable scenes such as this, Dame Vera Lynn nearing the summit of the line at Fylingdales. Falling leaves don't affect preserved railways in quite the same way as they do British Rail. This WD-210 has recently been joined by its twin from the Mid-Hants Railway. Both were brought back from service overseas in Greece, and originally it was intended for them to work together on the Mid-Hants. This was never to be, but they are now reunited on the NYMR. Another feature of autumn galas, which is purely for the fun of it, when the railway's volunteers can forget about just providing a ride for tourists, is the running of freight trains. The Welsh Valleys tank returned from Kent headed one of these downhill out of Goathland. At the other end of the station, a train is seen heading uphill from Gromont, under the classic northeastern footbridge. This is the recently restored and unique Stevenson Link Black 5, which, it is to be hoped, will return to the main line once again. She's waiting for a cross with the NRM-owned Q6, number 901, restored by Nelpeck. A particular feature of Goathland is its signalling, the wooden-armed lower quadrant northeastern signals having great character. The Southern Railway's sole regular representative in the northeast is this Maunsell S15 460, now painted in BR Express passenger green, despite being a mixed traffic engine. However, it looks superb on the climb from Gromont. Another regular feature of autumn galas is the running of local trains, in this case a two-coach train up the bank. This is brought up to Goathland by the returning 66 tank. The final feature of galas is the appearance of guest locomotives from other railways. The North Staffordshire Railway's LMS 4F060 was the Moors guest this year, transferred for a month from its present home on the East Lancashire Railway. Nunney Castle. She enjoyed a run up the last main line, the Great Western and Great Central Joint Line through Bicester to Banbury, on an Ealing to Stratford William Shakespeare Express. Banbury Yard was uncharacteristically empty as the train departed northwards. These yards served the Great Central route diverging to the east here to Woodford Hulse, now a distant memory. One of preservation's favourite locomotives, the only working member of her class, returned to the main lines in October after a sabbatical in the NRM at York. As featured in the last NewsRail, Duchess of Hamilton undertook 2 runs in October, the first heading north over the Settle and Carlisle. She returns south via the Cumbrian coast. As we'll hear in the next issue of NewsRail, when Andrew Dow will expand on his views of the NRM's future direction regarding the use of its locomotives on the main lines, the Duchess is set to have more outings on the main line in the immediate future. The Settle and Carlisle was also the venue for another of the privately promoted out and back runs from the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway with the double chimney Jubilee Bahamas. This train used Regional Railways Mark I and Mark II stock in their 2-tone blue livery, which really didn't match the Jubilee's maroon support coach. The reason for the use of the Regional Railways stock was that this was one of the now rare occasions when 2 mainline steam runs took place on the same day. The other was behind Duke of Gloucester on the Welsh Marches, with the familiar FSS maroon rake. This trip was to work the Duke southwards to Hereford via Wrexham and back to Crewe via Whitchurch. She'd return to the south and Didcot via another Marches run in early November. October saw another addition to the ranks of mainline locomotives when the Seven Valleys Small Ivet Mogul No. 4 6521 undertook a test run on an unusual route. The strange mixture of coaches and brake pans was concocted by Eastleigh Depot to enable the locomotive to undergo a test run from Eastleigh to Yeovil Junction and back. The turntable still survives at the junction, despite rumours of its sale in the late 1980s, and has seen use this summer for turning locomotives on the Exeter specials in late June and October. The Mickey Mouse Mogul is finished in BR Lime Green, known as Cambrian Green in this instance, and the test was required in order for the engine to be employed on a series of branch line specials in November on the Henley-on-Thames branch. This is part of Network South East's professed steam policy, which is not to ape the established pattern of intercity mainline tours. This, hopefully, will encourage a few more smaller engines to be restored to mainline condition, and the Swanage Railway has already given notice that the NRM's T9 440 will be overhauled to that standard. This test took place in accordance with tradition, the engine having run down to Eastleigh on the Tuesday, been weighed on the Wednesday and tested on the Thursday. The weather was rather mixed all day, but the sun came out at Yeovil to give us a cover photograph. The test was very successful, and the little engine will make a very welcome addition to the mainline ranks. Here she sets off back to Eastleigh. Three days later, the South Western's West of England main line was to see a further over to Exeter and back special, the Atlantic Coast Express, with Sir Lemuel taking the train westwards. Here she's at the summit of the hump between Templecombe and Sherborne. The returning Ace had Tor Valley at the head, her first eastbound departure from Exeter. She was to run through to Basingstoke, as it's no longer possible to take engines off trains at Andover in the eastward direction without a lot of shunting movements. Her 7-year mainline certificate expired in October, and she ran 2 final rail tours. Sadly, a third had to be cancelled due to insufficient bookings. She was worked south on a midweek train from Derby to London, which could only muster 7 unfilled coaches. She hasn't finished work yet. She's got another 3 years of her 10-year boiler certificate, and she'll be touring preserved railways for the next year. However, here's her last departure from Stratford on her last mainline run, an example of superb enginemanship as she gets to grips with an autumn wet rail. In February, she took an hour to do this departure. Flying Scotsman Services have said that Flying Scotsman will return to the main line in 1994. Let's hope this time she'll come in BR lined green as 60103. Using the Scottish Railway Preservation Society's Black 5 number 4 4871. The series was completed on Sunday the 6th of September with a train to Inverness, and on the following day the locomotive and stock were worked home again to the SRPS's base at Bowness. As can be seen, this was a day of fierce winds and occasional sunshine. The route taken was the former North British section of the East Coast Main Line from Aberdeen to Dundee, and then via Perth and Stirling to Bowness. A water stop was made at Montrose, where the locomotive left its coaches in the sidings whilst it was watered standing on the main line. The reason for this was that a stop was needed to allow a service train to pass the steam run, but the only location to obtain water was alongside the running lines. Since the train was running as an empty stop working, there was no problem about leaving the coaches in the sidings. As with most mainline approved locomotives today, the Black 5 has a low-level water inlet to allow it to be watered from pressurised hydrants. The source of water was something of a surprise, a standard fire hydrant in the middle of a busy side street, necessitating traffic control by a member of the SRPS support crew. With the wind whipping up the water in the Montrose Basin, the train set off again through the station, passing its still extensive goods yard before crossing the head of the basin over the single-line lattice girder bridge. The coaches, which have been used for the Elgin trains, are the SRPS's own mainline approved rail tour stock. The Elgin trains, of which only 3 ran out of 5 planned, use the maroon coaches plus 2 of the blue and grey ones. From Dundee, the train ran along the banks of the River Tay to Perth, entering the city on a single line section once again. This is the Tay Bridge, but of course not the Tay Bridge, merely the long curving single-line bridge with a footpath alongside it, which leads into Perth Station. From Dundee, the train had been travelling on a Caledonian Railway route, the North British only reaching the city via the south bank of the Tay. Perth itself is now a self-contained modern signalling area like Dundee, with semaphore signalling controlling all routes to and from the city limits. It's surprising that the 21-mile route between the two cities hasn't been modernised as well. Note that, although not yet repainted, the blue and grey coaches have already been fitted with unpopular bars over the windows. Unlike the northbound working of the train, it had never been intended that this should have been a public passenger train. It would have been quite possible for passengers to have arrived at Aberdeen before the 10:30 departure, as 2 sprinter services from either Glasgow or Edinburgh would have sufficed. Perth was the second water stop, and as she set off once again, she passed the site of the former Motive Power Depot, to the left of our picture, where the modern signalling centre now stands. From Perth she ran down the Caledonian Main Line through Stirling, where she took water once again, and then regained North British metals via Falkirk and the Glasgow to Edinburgh Main Line to return to Bowness over the recent junction at Manuel. Now alongside the waters of the Forth, the sun obscures the industrial wasteland behind the train. This is the Scottish Railway Preservation Society's notable branch on the foreshore, created from scratch, as there was no terminus at Bowness in steam days, merely a line serving the docks and the associated mine workings at Kinneil, and further along at Bridgeness. The train had run straight through, with just the reversal at Manuel, arriving here just after 6 o'clock. The locomotive had to leave its coaches on the branch in order to clear a line through the platforms so it could stable the stock and reach the locomotive shed. As she proceeds towards the station, we get the opportunity to see how well the award-winning recreated station has matured, very much the premier Scottish steam base. Coast Express in June led to an additional train in mid-September to that booked for 20th of September. The additional train, a week earlier, is seen approaching the summit at Hellerthig on the outward run. When Flying Scotsman Service's summer programme was announced, the late summer trains in Wales were to be headed by the Severn Valley Railway standard Class 4 tank, number 80079. This wasn't ready in time, so Brel Hewitt's celebrated 80080 took over the turns, becoming the only steam loco to appear on the Cambrian this year. All three trains were originally booked to run to Towyn, where the Tylwyth Lyn has its terminus, but due to restrictions imposed on the engine, were cut back to Machynlleth. The yellow flag was needed as the train was to run wrong line into the up platform. To compensate for the lack of a run along the Dovey Estuary, an additional run to Tullerthig and back was arranged, giving some passengers the opportunity to see their train from the line side before rejoining it for the return journey. Between each run to Tullerthig, the engine left the coaches in the platform and ran up into the loop alongside the old engine shed to water. This was supplied by a portable generator acting as a pump and was operated by the locomotive support crew rather than the local fire brigade as in previous years. The support coach also had to be shunted onto the down main line to bring the necessary hoses up to the loco shed. Curiously, while a steam engine was being serviced outside the shed, a Class 158 Sprinter was stabled inside it. Once watering was complete, she ran back into the far end of the loco yard to take on more coal. The train had left Shrewsbury nearly an hour late, but had regained time on the first ascent of Tullerthig. After all the servicing at Machynlleth, it left an hour late again. As the sun went down, our last view of the train was as she worked up the bank out of Welshpool. Once again, Bert Hitchens' rebuilt West Country Pacific was making history. This was the first publicly advertised steam run over the third rail, following the successful Ashford and Exeter weekends of the early summer. However, Network South East have decreed that runs over the third rail should be undertaken in darkness to reduce the number of people turning out to see them, and thus reduce the risks of trespass. However, darkness didn't seem to dampen the enthusiasm, and Bournemouth police estimated 4,000 people crowded onto Bournemouth Central's platforms at 10:30 at night to witness the historic arrival.
Very nice indeed. We thoroughly enjoyed it. How fast did you go? Officially 60 miles an hour, as prescribed. 60 miles an hour.
How long has it been since the steam train came to Bournemouth?
Oh, must be 25 years, I would think.
25 years? Is it a nice day for you?
Oh, very much so. I've only got a year to do, and it's nice to go back on steam engines again. We're very pleased to be here, actually.
Thank you very much.
They're on a high.
Everyone was enthusiastic. The same applied to the South's railway enthusiasts after a summer which they'd never expected. The train ran back to Waterloo behind modern motive power as it was needed the next day on the Settle and Carlisle, and Tor Valley and support coach ran on to Poole. call, she ran round her coach and then worked up. For the open day on the August bank holiday weekend, the two BR Preserve Pacific steam locomotives, Duke of Gloucester and Britannia, provided a top and tail shuttle through the length of the yard. Passengers joined at Bescott Stadium Station, but the most remarkable feature was the running of steam locomotives entirely under the wires. Is this another ban broken? Top and tail by two express passenger steam locomotives also featured on the next day on the former Great Central route out of Aylesbury. Nunney Castle and King Edward I were used on the Ace, or Aylesbury Centenary Express, a shuttle service to the first station on the line, Quainton Road, where the Buckinghamshire Steam Centre arranged for 3 trains to run parallel. The Quainton Road tenants were delighted to get the go-ahead for the first steam workings on the line since 1966, which ran on both the Sunday and Bank Holiday Monday. A vintage car rally supported the event at Quainton Road End. Top and tail working meant the King led the train back to the south, and it's seen approaching Aylesbury with the overgrown remains of the old Great Central Up main line still in position. At last, after a prolonged overhaul and many false starts, 4498 Sir Nigel Gresley returned to the main lines in August with a test run from Derby to Sheffield on the circular route via Alfreton, Woodhouse, Dore and Ambergate. She was booked to work 2 trains over the Settle and Carlisle after the test, but plans went awry, and although the test was passed, she wasn't weighed at Derby and so missed the rail tours. original rail tour plans had included August runs over the Settle and Carlisle, but due to the delay in her overhaul, these were reassigned to 6201 Princess Elizabeth. Once again the forces of nature were against her, and us, as she battled with gale-force winds on the section of line north of Appleby. The forces of nature were not to blame entirely for Flying Scotsman's 1.5-hour delay on the Cumbrian Mountain Express of the 19th of September. Wet sand in the sandboxes meant hand sanding of the rails at Hellifield and an undignified push in the rear up the long drag. Scotsman, now nearing the end of her current mainline certification, had 2 bonus runs in September when she took over for Sir Nigel Gresley, awaiting weighing. We now turn from the first preserved steam locomotive allowed on BR metals to the first preserved standard gauge railway, the Bluebell Railway, now in its 33rd year of preservation. We're going to concentrate on its stock of locomotives, which constitutes the largest collection of former Southern Railway and Southern Region locomotives in Great Britain. First out of the shed is the Southern's great maid-of-all-work, a Maunsell Mogul of Class U. Known as the U-boat, this was the passenger development of the celebrated N-class Moguls with 6-foot driving wheels instead of 5'6" for the earlier engines. The first series of U's were produced as tank engines of Class K, but were converted to tender engines after an accident in 1927 to one of the class, which cast doubts on their suitability for fast passenger work. 1618 was built as a 260, to the modified design. She is one of 4 preserved Southern Moguls, the remainder being on the Mid-Hants Railway. The Bluebell boasts a number of unique locomotives, prominent amongst which is this Adams radial tank of the London and South Western Railway. The elegant locomotives of this class were built for London suburban duties in the 1880s, but 3 survived until the 1960s for use on the Lyme Regis branch in Devon. Number 488 is the sole survivor. This engine was one of the first to arrive on the Bluebell Railway in 1961 after withdrawal that year. Sadly, she has had to be withdrawn once again in 1992, and the condition of her boiler is such that she may never steam again. equally elegant design of tank engine was produced for the South Eastern and Chatham Railway by Harry Wainwright from 1904 and became the standard passenger tank class for that railway, Class H. Again, only one survives, number 263, which was withdrawn in 1964. In its elaborate SECR livery, it is one of the Bluebell's star performers today. Also unique is the sole survivor of Richard Maunsell's Class Q 060s for the Southern Railway. They were officially mixed traffic engines, but were most at home on light freights such as this. This engine was also withdrawn for overhaul at the end of the summer season in 1992. The National Railway Museum owns the one survivor of the bullied Class Q1, officially a development of the Q class, but in practice totally different in every way except its 060 wheel arrangement. This returned to traffic just after the Q was withdrawn. Southern Express Power is represented on the railway by examples of both the Southern Railway's chief mechanical engineers. Maunsell's most famous design is the Schools or V-Class 440, which was the most powerful example of its wheel arrangement in Europe. 3 are preserved, the Bluebell having stow. Coupled inside the schools is a standard Class 4 tank, which has been recently transferred away from the Bluebell to South Devon. The train includes a number of Pullman vehicles, which are regularly used on the railway's recreation of the Golden Arrow boat train, which is seen behind Port Line, one of 10 Merchant Navy Pacifics in preservation. Port Line is a rebuilt Merchant Navy, the British Railways development of the original slab-sided Pacifics designed by Oliver Bulleid. 2 examples of the smaller West Country and Battle of Britain classes have worked on the Bluebell. This is 257 Squadron. The 257 Squadron only worked on the line for a short while, but the line has been the only working home for Blackmore Vale, currently out of service. The latter engine's tender is coupled behind 257 Squadron as she heads towards Horsted Keynes. The largest locomotive on the line is a British Railways Class 9F210O, a type which was uncommon on Southern Region metals, appearing only on oil trains to Forley. This is 92240, only the third member of the class to work in preservation. From the largest we go to the smallest, and the first. Bluebell is a Class P 060 tank of the South Eastern and Chatham Railway, originally produced in 1909 for motor train or push-pull duties by Wainwright. She was the first engine on the Bluebell. 8 were built and 4 survive today. Their earliest days were recalled in 1990, when the first part of the railway's northern extension was brought into use with push-pull workings as far as West Hoathly Tunnel. The other end of West Hoathly Tunnel is seen as the railway pushed its extension further towards its ultimate goal at East Grinstead. The works locomotive is the LSWR Adams Dock Tank Normandy of Class B4. The railway has declared itself a diesel-free zone and uses its small tank engines on these works trains, unlike most preserved railways. Another small locomotive on a freight is the unique North London Railway 060 tank, seen on a demonstration train on one of the railway's gala days. The train is the fire train, which has brought the Bluebell a number of awards. The railway also has a number of non-Southern locomotives, and has at times been host to visiting engines such as the Haydock Foundry well tank Bellerophon, seen at the back of this train. But perhaps the most famous tank engines on the line are the Terriers, or London, Brighton and South Coast Railway Class A1X tanks. The Bluebell itself is a former LBSCR route, so perhaps it's appropriate to end with a native locomotive type. 2 examples work here. This is Stepney, returning to Horsted Keynes with the push-pull on the extension. Duchess or Princess Coronation Pacifics built for the London, Midland and Scottish Railway, or LMS. 36 locomotives were built to the design, and 2 more to a slightly modified version of it after the war. 3 have been preserved. Number 46229 Duchess of Hamilton, the pride of the National Railway Museum at York, is the only one in full working order and permitted to run on British Rail metals today. Here we see her being prepared for one such run over the Settle and Carlisle in the summer of 1990. Our first view of her on a train is on the northern part of the Settle and Carlisle, as she heads south with a mainline excursion over the easier part of the line in the autumn. No Duchess was originally included in the list of locomotives for the National Collection, designed to be a representative selection of significant British steam locomotives. It was only through the saving grace of Sir Billy Butlin that this engine eventually became part of the NRM's collection, where she is now regarded as their flagship. When the Duchesses were withdrawn, Sir Billy Butlin purchased 2, together with other locomotives, to act as children's playthings at his holiday camps. After many years in this condition, the locomotive was loaned to the Friends of the National Railway Museum, who organised her return to mainline condition and eventual inclusion in the collection. In 1992, a ban has been imposed on steam tours over the S&C in the autumn due to problems with locomotives slipping to a standstill. However, 2 years ago, the Duchess gave a superb display on a misty and damp autumnal afternoon, with only a slight hint of problems. The Duchess hasn't only performed on the S&C. The North Wales coast and the London route out of Marylebone have seen her frequently. Her first run in 1992 was scheduled for late October, so here's a preview of the autumn run as she heads through Wennington en route from Carnforth to Crewe.